Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto is probably the most talked about Marvel book right now. So let's get into issue number 3, and I want to ask yourself, is this the best that Marvel has to offer? I'm Pops. Let's talk about it. All right, everybody. As you know, I have been reading comic books for a minute, and I remember when the Ultimate Spider-Man came out back when Bendis was not completely crazed and he was interesting and dynamic and a whole new universe and all that. And well, we're going to do all that again. And I really went into this with a lot of trepidations, but I have to admit, of the three titles so far that I've read, Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, and Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Spider-Man is by far my favorite. I enjoy the dynamics. I enjoy a lot of the elements that feel very nostalgic to what we want out of a Peter Parker driven Spider-Man universe. So let's get into issue number 3. And the action is kind of going to ramp up a little bit for the first time because the series has actually been pretty slow to this point. So basically, we find the Parkers where Richard and MJ are going to head out. They're going to go run some errands. They're going to do something else. By the way, there's MJ. She's looking very good, as you can imagine. This is actually some of the better drawn and great relationship dynamics between MJ and Peter. So we have that brief intro, and then May and Peter are going to spend some time together, and we get to our synopsis, which the book actually does a very good well. It catches you up. So if you're a reader that's new to the game, you can get a little history of the maker, and they basically had this go back in time, no superpowered characters and all that, and then how we have Ben Parker still alive, Kingpin, Wilson Fisk running the Daily Bugle, all that kind of stuff, right? So we end up with May and Peter. And what was interesting here was they kind of dial in her innocence and her sweetness of him trying out new costumes. So the first one, obviously, is the black costume, the Venom looking costume. And it's too dark. Quote, less scary, more cool. Then he switches over to the Ben Riley clone version. No, he doesn't go for that. And then he has this crazy dynamic ones. How about blue? And then finally, he finds the classic version. You see them in action. And it's a great, great panel. The original art on this is really, really fantastic. You have all these different dynamics. He also doesn't tend to have sort of like warped proportions that we saw back in the McFarlane era, but we find something that's actually very good. But the details, the creases in the costume, the shadowing, everything about this is done exceedingly well. All right, we're going to cut away then to kind of a slow burn element of the story with J. Jonah Jameson and Ben Parker, who run a business to themselves, right? They're going to have their own newspaper going up against the Bugle. And it seems like a lot more tedious than it is because they don't have any money. I mean, they're going to set up in a warehouse, but you end up with conversation that talks about the corruption in the city, the Kingpin, some of the things that we know in the Spider-Man universe. Here's how Jonah is drawn. Looks pretty good. He's talking about, they don't have any money for people, so they're going to figure out what to do. Ben is always like, we don't even have employees. He goes, that, my friend, is how you control expenses. So there's I don't want to say comedic elements, but there's some levity, and I like that. Peter shows up. I'm not quite sure exactly how to feel about like 30-year-old Peter with the beard. He's not really successful, but it's not totally out of character for this. I just wish there was better elements. One problem I've always had with the Peter Parker story arc is the fact that he's like a scientific genius. I mean, dude can create like, web shooters, yet he stays away from the science elements and he ends up only in journalism. And I think that there should be or could be something that could be done there that would at least justify a lot better. Now, the Amazing Spider-Man arc that Zeb Wells tried had him knee deep in some science and it just didn't work. It turned into a mess because he was just this woeful, pathetic individual. And just so we just can't seem to hit on all cylinders. I think what Hickman is doing here reasonably works. I like it so far. So as I said, there's a lot of pages of conversation and what's going on. You see them basically, investigating, trying to figure out some different things that are going on in town. And obviously things are going to point back to the Kingpin. So this is kind of the general flow of the book. Like I said, there's not a ton of action in this entire series. Actually, issue 1 barely had any action at all. But there are some things that happen, and we're going to get to that now. So basically, we have Peter, aka Spider-Man. He's going to, quote, go on a stakeout. Always wanted to do one of these. Not exactly sure how, but I can figure it out. All I know is these TV guys kind of just sit there and for a bit and then wait for the bad guy to show up. How long could this take? Then when you cut to him, he's completely bored out of his mind. He's made a spider hammock. He's eating donuts. He's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. nothing to do except watch, eat, wait, watch, eat, wait. Yeah, it's been 2 days. I wish something would happen. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a stakeout. It's literally there's jokes at this expense in movies, so I like the fact that at least it's a little bit of a joke before we finally get to some action. You basically have this fight scene where he breaks out with the Goblin chasing after someone in his costume. Here's the shot of the Goblin. We don't really know who the Goblin is. And by the way, there are some terrible fan theories about like Ben Parker being, or even Jonah being like, oh, well, you guys are crazy. It was clear all along who, and it's revealed in this issue. So you don't want that spoiler. I'll warn you again before we get to the spoiler who is the Goblin, but it should not have been a surprise who the Goblin is. Anyway, so there's a little bit of action scene, and this is Bullseye. So Goblin is actually playing good guy role here, going after Bullseye, and he and Spidey are basically teaming up to catch Bullseye. And that's the action that we get. We have this little like back and forth. He throws these cards that explode and short circuit the Goblin at different points. So this is basically the action sequence that is done here. I'm not totally thrilled about some of the layouts and some of the approaches and how they do things, but I will say for the most part, it's executed reasonably well. I like that shot. I like the fact that I don't care for Bullseye's design. I'm sorry, that's like a nitpicky thing for me. Bullseye can have a different design. I'm just a complete OG Miller fan, so for me, classic Bullseye is my favorite. I understand the Ultimate Universe, we probably want to cover his face because he could be something else. It would be kind of a cool spin for him to not be the traditional Bullseye. Maybe he could be Jeremy Renner or an Elektra or something like that. This would actually make some sense in this universe, but we'll see how that goes. So this kind of plays out for a little while before you have Spidey and Bullseye catching him, taking Spidey down briefly before catching him off guard. And then, of course, Spidey's the one that catches him. And then you have this sort of like back and forth of like, well, what happens next? He's like, I don't know. I've never caught a bad guy before. So this is a big fisticuffs moment. So then they kind of like do it. And Goblin's going to basically do his thing. And then we kind of get to the spoiler. So I'm going to jump ahead to the spoiler. If you don't want to know who the Goblin is, I totally get it. I'm still all in on the book. Before I get to the spoiler and the ending, let me ask you though, isn't it kind of sad that this is the best that Marvel has to offer? Isn't it? I mean, we're at the point where the Ultimate Universe done by Hickman, who's basically replaying an old story from a long time ago, the Ultimate Universe, create a new universe, retreading on the backs of all the stuff that was created by, Stan and all the OG creators. That is the best that Marvel has to offer right now. Like, we have stuff that's happened with the Energon universe. We have stuff happening with Conan. We have stuff that's happening with what Jeff Johns is doing with Geiger and Rook and all that kind of stuff. People are gonna. There's actually been some good stuff done with Turtles. The irony is, Marvel. I've been enjoying Incredible Hulk, sort of, but I'm not out there just cheerleading like it's this great book. It's just it's okay. They ruined Ghost Rider. They can't get out of their own way. I don't personally understand what they're trying to do with the Ultimate Universe because they're trying to say there's no superheroes, but we constantly have things like this. We have this Goblin who has a tech suit. We're going to have characters that didn't need special powers. Like, so is a highly trained Hawkeye still exist or not? Is a highly trained Black Widow still exist or not? Is Scorpion or Rhino or some of those other ones, Shocker, the most powerful people in the city because they just use cool tech? They don't have superpowers per se. So there's a whole bunch of things that are just we're not supposed to think about. We're not supposed to give any thought to. So anyway, enjoy the book. I'm still in it to win it. Let's see how it goes. Let's get to that spoiler that I really wasn't shocked at all, but I want to give you guys a little heads up in case we get there. So it gets to a moment where we have an exchange between Spidey and the Goblin, and then suddenly, because he's saying something like, be it as may, instead of cool, others might call it something else, proprietary, and he hits this button on his chest, and during that time, then suddenly the suit is enabled, and the mask is starting to reveal that he is actually Peter. So it's connected, authenticated, paired, suit deactivating. What? No deactivating. And now he reveals that he's Peter. But then Goblin reveals, hi, I'm Harry Osborn. Well, we knew Harry because Norman's already passed away. There was a funeral earlier on. We have mentioned that there is no Norman in this universe. So the fact that it's Harry who becomes a Goblin, not a surprise. And basically it's kind of like this meek beta male, let's go have coffee sometimes kind of conversation. It's like, Peter, have you noticed that the world is kind of strange and dangerous? It's like, let's have coffee. Yeah, starting to notice that. It's like, cool, let's have coffee. It's like, what? It's like, so again, we're building and building and building, but it seems like we have opportunities here to like, why is Peter not asking him? Like, why are we taking down Bullseye? What are your thoughts on Fisk? Why we're not having really like how did you get this suit? How did you deactivate my suit? We just don't really have much of anything that really, I think, it seems like a lot of wasted time. You know, Chuck Dixon always says, "Is there a way I could have said it better?" And I kept reading the book and I read it again. I thought to myself, "Yeah, I could think of like 20 ways that this would be a lot faster and more robust with something that would make me want to turn the pages and want another book." I'm going to get another book and I'm in it because it's okay, but it's not making me like, oh, I can't wait for issue number 4. It's just sort of like, okay, that's cool. Let's keep churning along. And that's the problem that I'm at. And again, this is the best that Marvel has to offer. So, and with that, let me know what you guys are thinking. Is this something that you're still staying up to? Is there another Marvel title that I'm missing that you guys think is great? I personally didn't care for Ultimate Black Panther. It's okay. Don't understand why T'Challa's got all this tech. We don't have superheroes, but we do. Ultimate X-Men to me has been a major negative. I can't stand Ultimate X-Men. I think that it was a fine starter story, and that the end of issue number 1, Xavier and some X-Men should have shown up. They would have been there to recruit Armor and bring her into their universe, because they could have kept a low-key profile because we're not superheroes and mutants and whatever would be weird. It just seemed like a perfect fit, and yet it just kind of plods along, and we're all supposed to be like, yay, and I'm just like, hey. So anyway, that's my take on it. I do enjoy Ultimate Spider-Man, but in the grand scheme of things, I sure wish there was better things to talk about. So love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching. I am Pops.